Hello, I'm Dr. Stanley Sandler. The program is Stan the History Man. Today I'd like to talk about the Tatra. The Tatra is this is a model of the Tatra I bought 20 years ago in Northern Virginia and assembled it. It's made out of cast steel, I suppose, and it's based upon pretty accurately upon the Czechoslovakian automobile called the Tatra, third oldest automobile company in the world. And they always were known for being different in their mechanically speaking. But in 1934, they really went overboard with this aerodynamic, streamlined Tatra. In fact, it's the only streamlined car to go into mass production. Of course, mass means like they made 4,000 of them. But at any rate, Adolf Hitler, there's a lot of good evidence that Hitler based the Volkswagen upon the Tatra. He saw it at the 1934 automobile show, at the Berlin Automobile Show, and he went over to the Tatra stand. And now, of course, the Nazis hated the Czechs, but that's okay. He was fascinated by this aerodynamic Tatra, and there are some drawings that supposedly were made by Hitler in which he scaled down the big streamlined Tatra. It was a big automobile. I mean, it's like a luxury car, to the people's car, the Volkswagen. And this was going to be the people's car that we were riding on the Autobahn. And actually, of course, the Volkswagen, that's kind of a popular name for it. It's actually called the KDF wagon, the Kraft durch Freude, Strength Through Joy, which was a program the Nazis had for social welfare. They could take cruises. In fact, they were the first to have cruise ships that had no classes on them. So the Germans would go up to Norway to meet fellow Nordics, and down to the Balearic Islands to get warm, so on these ships. And part of this program was to make an automobile available to the masses, the German masses. And the sad story was that the Germans were putting money down on it. You'd buy stamps and put the stamps in a book. Then when you got to a certain number, then you could pick up your Tatra. But the war intervened before they could do that. And these Germans, I don't know if they ever got their money back. But at any rate, Tatra continued to manufacture these cars. They were luxury automobiles, so they weren't mass produced, but they were well known to be fast and streamlined, and a lot of ideas that were not popular at the time. I mean, people talk about the Chrysler Airflow as being so far ahead of its time, but the Tatra I owned a Tatra, actually a smaller version called the Tatra Plan, which, and here's a picture of it. Let's see if we can hold it up here. The Tatra Plan. This is I had this until recently, and when the war intervened, the Germans, of course, took over Czechoslovakia even before the war, and they kept the plant going. Only two car companies manufactured automobiles during the war. Saab was the one, because Sweden was neutral, and the Czech Tatra company. The Germans commandeered the cars as for staff cars. And the problem was these cars were pretty dangerous. Their rear, I should have mentioned that earlier, they're rear engine. And the big Tatras, the streamlined ones, had 8 cylinders. So 8 cylinders in the back meant a lot of back whiplash. And a number of these cars, the Germans were driving them like they drive Mercedes, and they'd wind up in a ditch. And the Czechs during the war called the Czechoslovakia's secret weapon. So, but I say they were manufactured during the war. After the war, the head of the Tatra company the communists had taken over Czechoslovakia in 1948, was accused of being an accomplice for the Nazi because they were making Tatras during the war and making money on it. So the communist regime put him in jail, I think, for 5 years. Then he was released in 1951 and went to Germany and took a streamlined Tatra with him. And that was his personal car. Hans Svedlinka was his name. And he died in, I think, 1957, something like that. He's considered one of the great geniuses of the automobile business. This very streamlined Tatra, so much so when they would do these wind tunnel tests on the Tatra, scored higher than the Volkswagen. And I think only one car scored higher than the Tatra, and that was the Rumpler, which was another fantastic streamlined car of the 1920s in really limited production. If you ever see a Rumpler, you'll never see another one. I think there might be 2 in the world, something like that. But next to the Rumpler, the Tatra had the least air resistance. And so also after the war, they started to make a smaller, they call it Tatra Plan. That's the car I just showed you, which I had. And the Tatra Plan was produced from 1947 until 1954, something like that. We're not sure because, you know, the communist records were not exactly open, communist cars. As a matter of fact, after the war, well after the war, after the fall of the, well, just before the fall of the Iron Curtain, Chrysler, which is always buying up other companies, wanted to buy them, looked into buying the Tatra. And one of the questions that these eagle-eyed accountants, these capitalists, asked, well, how much did it cost to build a Tatra? And the company couldn't answer. They couldn't give them a real answer because what happened in all the communist countries, the cars that they made were often given away. Olympic athletes might get one. Maybe a doctor would get one. Provincial bosses, Communist Party bosses might get one for free or for a discount. So it wasn't like this is how much we charge. You know, no. So finally, Chrysler just gave up. You know, it's okay. So anyway, the last Tatra we feel went off the production lines in 1954. About 4,500 of them were made. Again, we don't have accurate figures, but that seems to be the experts in this field figure that's what it is. And so that brought the streamlined the Tatra Plan to an end, and the streamlined Tatra with the tail fin probably ended around 1957. That's a little brief history of one of the most interesting cars in the world. Thank you very much. I'm Dr. Stan Sandler, Stan the History Man.